right, welcome back, everybody. Again, it is Dog Talk. Glad to have you guys here. I've got an exciting episode coming to you guys. Normally something that would happen either in the off season or something that would happen in the bye week between Florida and, well, I guess whoever we played before that. But I've got Hunter on. Hunter's coming on with us in a normal, usual episode that's not normal or usual at all, because this will be the first time I have like a true guest in season to kind of go through things. And right now he's kind of looking around trying to find a schedule, if I was guessing, to be able to look and
bingo
and talk about everything. But Hunter, glad to have you here again as we are in the season. We're not mid-season. We're not
exciting.
off-season. We're playing football already.
Well, thank you. I love doing this. You know it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is kind of what we're going to run through today. We're gonna recap. That's one reason you haven't seen this episode come out when it usually does, like on Sunday or Monday in this case, because there were so many different games going on throughout the entire weekend, which was awesome. Getting to watch football Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I literally watched football for 5 straight days.
God, that's great.
Which we're going to talk about all of that good stuff, but we're going to recap the game against Clemson. We're going to recap some of the other games that have been going on around the country and just kind of take a look at some of those, and then we'll start to get into what's going on this week. But that's where we're going to start. Wherever you guys are listening, we appreciate it. Make sure you guys follow us on Twitter, X. I don't think I'll ever stop calling it Twitter. It's just what it's always been. Instagram, all the things at Dog Talk 20. All right, so let's get into it. So before this game, we knew that Roderick Robinson was going to be out with turf toe. He had surgery and all that good stuff. And we also knew that more than likely Trevor Etienne would be out due to suspension. And sure enough, we got to football time. Trevor was indeed out of the game. And I talked about this a little bit last week, how it kind of stinks for his family. Obviously, his brother played at Clemson, and, now they're playing against Clemson, and he's not even going to be on the field in this one. So it kind of stinks for his family. But at the same time, I love that Kirby actually he didn't take his foot off the pedal, where a lot of coaches, I feel like they'd be like, okay, I know I said I was going to suspend you, but they give this person the ability to be able to play, where he rightfully had to sit out in this suspension. How long it's going to last, I don't know. But it kind of stinks for his family that they didn't get to see him play. But I think that sends a message to your team to say it doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter if you're about to be the first string guy up. If you are not listening, or if you're not obeying by the laws that we've set here at this school, the parameters that we've given you, you will be suspended. And we've cut multiple players over the summer that I know we've talked about. But we didn't have those guys. But there's a guy this week that he stepped up in a huge way, and that's Nate Frazier.
Oh, my gosh.
The dude came in as a freshman. By the way, obviously, Georgia wins this football game 34-3. We're going to dive deeper into it as we kind of go here. But I just want to start off just by giving praise to a guy who we thought was maybe third string, possibly even fourth string coming into this season, behind Branson Robinson, behind Trevor Etienne, behind Roderick Robinson, possibly a fourth string guy that all of a sudden was kind of thrust into being the first, second string guy behind Branson, because we saw a little bit of him, but he didn't bust out like Nate Frazier did.
No.
I mean,
no, it was incredible. By the way, is Dylan Bell considered a running back?
No,
or is he'll just do anything?
He kind of became a utility player last year.
Unbelievable.
I mean, we lined him up a lot at running back when we couldn't really get things going last year. I think DeJohn was hurt, maybe even Kendall was hurt a little bit. Kendall, unfortunately, it seemed like he battled injury his entire career at Georgia, and really not until the end where he really started to kind of break out even more and showed you what he was his freshman season, because I know even in his freshman season he kind of stepped up and it was like, oh, this guy's going to be huge for us. But Nate got to do that in this game, and that was a lot of fun. But to answer your question, I think technically Dylan Bell is a wide receiver.
Okay.
That's what he shows up on a depth chart, but we've just used him
I had that.
in so many different – again, we lined him up at running back probably more last year than we did at wide receiver.
Yeah.
I may be incorrect on that numbers. I'd have to ask somebody and they can kind of check that. But that dude, he showed up and he had an incredible game.
Yeah, I think it's always great. How exciting it must be to build upon, and I think even Kirby said something after the game, or did I dream that he said that we're not ready to anoint anybody? Did he say that, or did I dream that? I don't know. Anyway,
there was so much going on afterwards. I really haven't heard a lot.
He did.
Gotcha.
Because and I think that's how they're able to keep guys. Hopefully, we don't know the full story, but keeping them humble, and keeping them part of like the team. And then because he said, Kirby said, take Cash Jones. He said nobody's talking about him. but he picks up a key block. All of those things that, all right, let's be honest, regular fans, we're not going to notice.
No.
We might pick up something now and then, but not on a regular basis like a true professional, if you will.
I had seen yesterday, it may have even been, I actually saw a video of that exact thing. Kirby kind of gave kudos to Nate when he came through,
right.
But then he was right there with Cash Jones hyping him up about, he had gotten that key block to really set the tone right there. And he had a decent game too as well. He wasn't just a blocker in the game.
No, I think it was excellent, and I don't want to hijack, but I want to just say one quick thing
about
the game.
No problem.
Is the tight end from Vanderbilt, Humphreys is his last name? I can't remember. I don't know his. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. Is that the next Lad McConkey? That's the question.
No, Ladd was too fast and too precise. But what I loved is when he was running, I mean, he put his shoulder down, and he was not going to be the nail. He decided, I'm going to be the hammer.
Yeah.
And that was a hit that he laid on that guy. And that, to me, tells you so – that's the kind of thing you show your kids. Like, guys, you don't have to just take a hit, like, as an offensive player. Like, this is how you play this game,
Oh yeah,
it was that. There's big hits, but there's not a. I mean, Brock used to do these things. Running backs, DeJean would bounce off of guys, and I know all of that. For some reason, that play just really stood out.
I mean, most guys, they're going to kind of let the foot off the pedal and get ran over on the 1 yard line or get knocked out of bounds or something, and he was like, "No, I'm getting this touchdown." And
I love how they I love how they spread it out. It seems to me either the play calling or it could be Carson, but the way that they spread the ball out.
They spread it out a lot. I'm going to look and see exactly how many it was that Carson actually spread the ball out to, because it was a lot. Like when I looked, I think there were multiple guys who had a bunch of touches. It wasn't just one guy. And we've talked about that in years past too. Georgia hadn't had a 1,000-yard receiver in a long time, but especially over the past few years, the ball has been spread out to so many guys, and that was not any different to start the season. Let's see, I'm going to count and see just how many we actually had. So Carson Beck, obviously great game, 23 for 33, throws 278 yards, 2 touchdowns, which was good. Here's how many guys got touches. London Humphreys, we talked about, got 2, had the 1 touchdown, 63 yards. Arian Smith, 5 touches. Lawson Lucky, 2. Dominique Lovett, 3. Dylan Bell, 4. Nate Frazier got 1. Colby Young got 2. Cash Jones got 2. And Branson Robinson got 2. So of all of those guys, we're talking 9, 10 guys touched the ball to get 278 yards. And the most one guy got was 63. Yep. 63, 56, 37, 33. That's how it goes. But it's spreading the ball up across everybody, not just one guy. And that's the thing that I've kind of, there might be some that say, Georgia, don't go there to be a wide receiver because you're not going to get looked at in the same way. And I would say, that's not really true. The ball's going to get spread out more. And I like to see that. It gives everybody an opportunity, but it's also, hey, if you're stepping up making the plays, you're going to get looked at a lot more. If you're not, you're not. If you're dropping the ball left and right, you're not going to get looked at as much anymore.
Yep.
But I love how, and to me, that also says a lot about Carson Beck, that he's not just pinpointing in on Arian Smith, or he's not just pinpointing in on Dylan Bell that's running out. He's looking and reading the entire field, and when something's open, that's where he goes. Instead of trying to, all right, I'm only going for this guy, and I'm going deep with him regardless of what's happening on the rest of the field. Yep. But there's a lot of other guys that are on the field too. I do also want to give credit to Nate Frazier, too. He kind of paid homage when he got that first touchdown to Ty Gurley, and also Sony Michel with his, praying down and then his hands.
I didn't even pick up on that.
Yeah. I thought that was really cool. I was like, oh, man, it made me immediately go straight to
thinking
about Sony Michel and all, and I was like, man,
wow.
that's awesome. So that was fun to see. He ends the night with 83 yards and a touchdown on 11 carries. He averaged 7.5 a carry, which is really good. Dylan Bell only had 1 touch in the running back room, but it was 27 yards by itself. Carson Beck also had to scramble a few times. Only got 19 yards on it, but not the end of the world. And then Cash had that one run for 15 yards. Also, the one that kind of, again, surprised me was Branson Robinson. You know, we talked about him coming in, kind of being that bruiser. Georgia's always had the lightning fast guy, also with a bruiser in the backfield. And I don't think that's anything different this year, but I did notice it was a lot harder for Branson Robinson to really get started in this game, and he never really did. He rushed 7 times for 12 yards. Part of that I want to give credit, especially in the first half, which is when we saw him the most. And again, that football game was tied at 0 after 1 quarter, and then it was 6-0 going to halftime. So it wasn't a barn burner at the beginning of the game.
Correct.
Credit to Clemson's defense
Correct.
there, where they stood up and
No
you
doubt.
could not run through the tackles, and you were doing good to break anything on the edge either. So I don't want to discredit 100% of what Clemson did, because in the end of this game, Georgia got the offense figured out, and the defense did what it's done every year, you know, that I've known under Kirby. But he never really got started. And I think a lot of that was, you know, when a guy gets in the game and you can't really get that rhythm, you know, sometimes I think you do kind of go the other direction, especially considering what Nate started to do as the game went on. Started to really start busting plays and getting more and more open. Now, I haven't heard if he had any kind of injury or anything like that coming into the game. I know we know he obviously came off of an injury from last season where he didn't play. So that could play a lot more into this.
I think it's more that it's usually, I remember with Nick Chubb, somebody was talking after one of his, when he really messed up his knee going out of bounds against Tennessee, is that it was the psychological part.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that obviously in a negative way, but I think you just kind of got to get into the feel of the game in the fact of coming off of a major injury. If that is the case, whatever, he's going to be fine.
Yeah,
he's going to be fine.
I think it's going to be fun to see all of these guys. I mean, even when you get Trevor back, and even when you get, you know, I think we've all looked at what Roderick Robinson was starting to do at the end of the year.
Like, by the way, when you talk about our running backs, I
get
get this like smile on my face, because it is ridiculous to say ETN, Roderick, Branson, and Frazier.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding? Are you?
Oh yeah, and
4, not just the. I mean, I guess you can, because of his age and his history in the league. You can go, okay, Trevor is going to be, let's just say, a step above. But I mean, maybe.
This is the thing. From what I've seen, and I think everybody can kind of agree with this, when somebody gets on the field and they produce and they show you, hey, I'm cut out for this.
Right.
Very often, or very few times that I've seen, Kirby takes that person off the field. It's not very often that somebody gets on the field and has results that are positive the way that Nate Frazier did, and then the next week, now it's Tennessee Tech this week, but then the next week they go, you know what, great first game, take a seat back, you know. But now if when ETN gets in, if he sees the field 4 or 5 times as much as Nate does, we've got to realize, okay, evidently this guy's even better than that.
Right.
Which is a big deal, because I think everybody right now, you know, the thought is ETN is RB1. He's the first guy up. That's the guy. Well, if that was our 4th running back and he did that.
I know. That's why I can't help but I mean, I look like the cat that ate the canary grinning over here. Like, it's mind-boggling to think about.
Georgia, to me, has always been a running back university, and very few years has it been where it takes much of a dip. You know, that may have even been one of my questions in the offseason was, okay, we lost Kendall Milton. We lost Dejon Edwards. And even in years previous, when you lose Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, DeAndre Swift, all of these guys, it's like, what's coming next? And then it's like we get to the next year, and you go, all right, never mind.
And that's why I always, when we talk about certain things, I'll always say I trust the coaching staff, because year in and year out, to be honest, I'd never heard, I don't get into the recruiting as much. You know, you hear, oh, they signed the number 1 team or the top 5 or the 3rd rank, whatever. Great. But you can't help but think about the success with some of the walk-ons. Guy like Jordan Davis, who's a 3-star, you turn him into, I guess, I don't know if he got drafted in the first or second round, but they're going to find the guys.
Yeah.
And so I never knew the name Nate Frazier until he went in. And they were talking about, the analyst said something, they compared him to Swift.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
so
yeah.
And he ran, and they're like, oh, yeah, we can see why they're talking. He kind of has moves like Swift. So anyway, it's incredible,
Yeah.
and I mean, we just need to be thankful as fans, and we need to not totally lose our mind. I'm going to say something real quick. I was watching SEC Morning, or
Maybe.
Okay, Peter Burns and Chris Doering Monday morning, since it was a holiday, so I was at home watching it. They're great, okay, great show, and they were really, who they like, obviously, but they do a really good job of being impartial.
Mm-hmm.
And they took some callers, and unfortunately, what sounded like probably a slightly older gentleman from Georgia was like, "Hey, Chris, the other night, you were really talking up so-and-so and so-and-so, and you weren't really giving a lot of love to Georgia." That's the kind of stuff that makes me cringe, because he had done nothing but talk really highly of Georgia, and I respect that. And when they got off the phone, Peter Burns made a comment. He was like, so far, Georgia fans, y'all have done a good job of not becoming, he flat out said, becoming Alabama fans. And again, throughout doing the show, I've always said that is we have to be so freaking thankful. We're not a flash in the pan. We have this unbelievable staying power. Don't mess with it. Who cares? Even if it's somebody that doesn't talk good about them, okay, let it just, analysts, one of my problems is analysts are always going to be kind of homers.
Yeah. You can't help it.
And I know they can't help it, but it's almost, listening to Tebow, who I like.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about Florida. Now, granted, they probably really felt the way they did about Florida before the Miami game. You don't really know what's going to happen on the field until you get on the field. But with how bad they are, now I want to see, is he picking Florida because he just can't stand the idea of picking a Miami or another team? Or will he say, look, I love my Florida Gators, but this team has got a lot of problems and a lot of holes, and I don't mean that disrespectfully to the players, the coaches, and any of that. They just don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want to see. And that's the one. Look, you can't help it. It doesn't matter. And I'm not picking on it because he's a Florida guy, because how can you not respect a guy like Tebow? Mm-hmm. But anyway, going back is I just want us to – we need to savor this.
Oh, yeah.
As we've said, I'm a lot older than you, but I'm not old. I didn't have to watch Georgia games on a black and white television. Now, I do remember having a television that didn't have a remote control, but that could be part of the times and part of family finances.
Control, right?
But I just want everybody, let's enjoy this.
Yeah.
Enjoy it. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I know we kind of said it a little bit in the off season too. We had some of this kind of same conversation. I love it goes right back to the mantra that Kirby said. What year? It's 2017, I think, the year that we made it to the national championship and we lost. Kirby said we're not going anywhere, and he was right, and we haven't. And one thing that I love, and you mentioned it there, is being thankful for it. But like the fact that we are where we are. To me, number one team in the country. Doesn't matter until the end of the year, which that's fine. But we've won 2 of the last 3 national championships. Very well possible could have won 3. Didn't get that opportunity, so be it. We're past that now. It's time to move on. It was really hard for me not to move on for a while, and FSU fans still hadn't moved on, but now they ain't got a choice. We'll talk about that in a minute. But anyways.
Baby.
So we should be thankful because to me it's like, hey, look where we are. We are in the chase every single year. Mm-hmm. We're not left out any year. Last year, somewhat of an exception, but that's not going to happen again. And when people start to look and they go, they want to yah about this, that. Look at Vanderbilt. We're not them. Look at LSU of 2020. We're not that. We haven't fallen off. We're still there. All of these teams that you could look at and you could say, we could be Mississippi State.
Florida.
Oh, my goodness. We could be that team, but we're not. Yeah. We have a coach, and we've got a coach who's smart, no pun intended, and knows who to put in the right places and knows who to put on the field week in and week out.
And I have to say, does an exceptionally good job of hiring assistants.
Yeah.
That is – it makes all the sense in the world, okay? But there are a lot of head coaches – and I don't want to pick on Dabo, but
we're going to get to that in a minute.
But it's been a while since they've been quote unquote relevant in the national picture, if you will. And it's not worked with his assistants. Yeah. He found it, and then when he's lost it, I mean, it's not that they lost it to the point where they're having a 12-2 season.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a significant drop off. It's not just because of his assistants. It's not a light switch solution, okay? But that's one of the things that I think Kirby probably going back to seeing, from his dad as a coach and obviously his tutelage under Saban, because obviously Saban did an excellent job replacing assistants year after year after year.
It's also not to mention the fact that some of the assistants that he's hired and people in these coordinators were head coaches themselves, and for the most part have stuck around for extended periods of time, not just here for a year, gone.
Right.
Here for a year,
right.
2 years, a little bit out of it, going to the next thing, trying to be a head coach somewhere else. I mean, you think about Muschamp, who tried it at 2 different schools and it just didn't work, and he's still with Georgia. You think about Matt Luke, who's not with Georgia anymore, but he was here for a little while.
Right.
And now Dan Lanning, he's going on to be a head coach at Oregon,
which
has been
I was going to say,
he's
one of the assistants that has had, this incredible success.
Yeah. But you make a great point. Even the guys that he's brought in from, I mean, think about Todd Monken's gone. He brought Mike Bobo back.
Right.
And we're still, it's year 2 back under Bobo, so we're going to see kind of how things go with all of that. But he's done a great job of that, and that's very exciting. And then you look at the other side of the ball, like you just talked about. And I listened to a show earlier this week that they did this, where they started to talk about the Georgia-Clemson game. They spoke slightly on Georgia for just a minute, and then they downfalled on all that is wrong with Clemson and everything. And I was like, that's good and all. And then at the end, I can't remember. I wish I'd remember what the show was. But at the end, the guy said, listen, this isn't about Clemson. This is about how freaking good Georgia is again and again and again. And here they are this year, being good again.
Yeah.
And we're gonna talk about what's going on with Dabo, because that's something to talk about. But the fact that Georgia is what they are, let's give them their credit first, and then we can talk down on Clemson all we want to afterwards. And I was like, hey, that's actually a fair point, because they spent 15 minutes talking about all the issues with Clemson, and then they took the next 5 to say, actually, this is more about Georgia than it is Clemson. And the first half of that game was great. Like, it was one of those, and I saw some people that were kind of fussing. They were like, what's happened? Oh, here we go, the Mike Bobo offense. And I just looked. I literally took a screenshot of this game in the first national championship under Kirby Smart in 2021. That game ended 10-3. We had 1 touchdown, by the way, that came on defense, not on offense. And a Clemson team who was ran by DJ Uiagalelei, who is now at FSU again. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But that was a 10-3 football game that we went on to win the national championship that season. So I just took a screenshot of that and I shared it, and I was like, y'all are a little too worried about this.
Yeah.
In a game that's 6-0 right now, you're too worried about a game that was won in the same fashion a year we won a national championship.
So, all right, confession time.
Go ahead.
Okay. sometimes I get filled with anxiety with the games, like not bad anxiety. And so my wife had to work for a little bit, and so it was me and the boys, and so next thing you know, we're knocking stuff out. But the game is on in multiple rooms.
Mm-hmm. By the way, do you have like a delay when you do that? Like is one TV slightly off?
Slightly.
Yeah. We're also going to have to talk about the DirecTV fiasco. We'll get to that in a minute.
Oh, I don't know about that.
It was a mess. Anyways.
So we were just doing some things. It wasn't much, and it was kind of covered the first half, and it was because, I sat, watched kickoff, watched them, and I was like, oh, boy, this is, looking like a pretty tough game. Yeah. So I have to get up and I start doing stuff. And I'm the TVs are loud enough. My house isn't that big, so going from one place for what me and the boys were doing, it was perfect. And there were a couple of times. There was one time in particular where, Branson was going right up the middle and getting 6 inches, and I'd had enough of that. And I will confess, I was one of those going, this dadgum Bobo, And I like him as an offensive coordinator, but I'm just saying I get it.
Yeah.
I like the people that were saying those things, airing those frustrations. The difference is that I'm not going to air that on my phone. Yeah. I'm going to do it in my house, and my kids are going to kind of laugh, and they're going to kind of like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, all right, sit down for a little history lesson.
Let's go back a few years. I do get that, because what I learned, though, is – what Georgia has tended to do in some of these games is all they're doing in the first part of the game is they're just wearing on the team. They're just leaning on you.
Yeah.
They've got what, at first a lot of people even said this doesn't look like one of the best offensive lines in the country, but I also have to give that credit to Clemson in a fact that I still think that they have a good defense. And
yes.
I do think that the front seven in that defensive line for Clemson is good. There's a reason they're still ranked in the top 25, which we're going to talk about with this week's stuff. But Clemson is not a bad football team.
No.
They still have stuff that they've got to figure it out for sure. But Georgia, it was like we were just leaning on them.
Well, yes. And it's almost kind of like a prize fight. They go through several rounds, you're kind of sizing each other up.
Bend, don't break.
Out your tendencies. And then all of a sudden, hey, let's continue. We're not hurt here in the first half. Make our adjustments. And then we saw what happened in the second half. The screenshot you sent me, I don't know who it was. Oh, yeah, Georgia is still that 800-pound
wrecking ball
of spinning chainsaws. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that is good. I think, it was, again, first half of the game, it's like, ooh, man. I'm like you, where it makes you kind of like, I don't like this. I don't like this. But then, we come out of the half, and to me it kind of had ventures of the South Carolina game last year, minus letting South Carolina score in the first half the way they did.
Yeah.
Where the second half, that was a different football team that came out. In this case, it wasn't, because the defense was still just as elite as it was before. But offensively, it's like we made a change. Whether it was Mike Bobo, whoever it was, on the offensive side of the ball, they made the changes they needed to make in that second half to where it was like, we now know what y'all are doing. Yeah. It's not going to work anymore.
We're going to exploit it.
From that point on, Georgia really started to roll, which was fun, and it was exciting to see. Again, I think I picked this one. I thought it was going to be like 34-17 because I was like, I'm not exactly sure what Georgia's going to do at this one, and it ended up 34-3. The line on it was 13.5, and the under was 48.5, I think. But looked good. Now the question that I will bring up, because I do think it's something to have a question about at least, is Dabo potentially in his last days? Our last season or seasons coaching at Clemson if he can't find a way to adequately adapt to the new environment of college football, because I get that he wants to prove things his way. He wants to do things in a way that is not normal, is not the way that everybody's doing it right now. Is that enough that you think in by the end of this season, somebody looks at him and says, Dabo, you're going to have to change or you're going to have to leave?
So to answer your question, I think unless he decides to leave on his own.
Are they okay with 10-2 seasons?
Well, I hope they
9-3.
I think that, let's just say, if they kind of muddle through the year, if it's not if they don't turn it around, but it's not a complete failure like where they, have a losing record or struggle to make it to a bowl game, I think that the powers that be will say, look, we respect you, as they should, but they are paying him an exorbitant amount of money. And unfortunately, what he's being paid is not – it was showing up on the field and what he had done, but it's not now.
Yeah.
And I think that out of respect for him, for respect what he's done, unless he decided to leave on his own, the move to me would be, Dabo, we want you to stay at Clemson, but we can't make you do anything. But as the athletic director or the president, sometimes you hear those stories about head coaches, they don't even care what the athletic director thinks, even though on paper that's their boss.
The president like that?
No, as in the only person that will cause them to kind of shake in their boots is the president of the university.
Gotcha.
Okay. Whoever that may be. If it's that athletic director, Coach, I'm going to urge you to adapt to the current way that football rosters are being managed.
Yeah.
I support you and understand what you've been wanting to do. And that's me if I was the athletic director. I'm going to give you a chance. But if he flat out says, no, I won't, I'm not going to do that, okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
And then if as athletic director, you answer to the president or the board of directors, board of regents, whoever it may be. Now, if they decide, he's got to go, then he's going to go.
Yeah, that's just where I take it. Like you mentioned it even then. When Brent Venables was there and he had his guys, they were really good. But we're talking about a stretch from 2016 to 2018, 19 was really the stretch where Clemson was, first of all, in the playoffs all of those years, if I'm not mistaken. Won 2 of those 4 national championships. So I get the credit side of it. Just like in 5 years, if all of a sudden you were like, all right, Kirby, you got to do something to change. Whereas I think Kirby would probably adapt a little easier because he understands how this college football landscape is changing. But we're also talking about something that is now, we're 5 years removed from them even being in a playoff. We're 5 years. 5 years. That's where I start to look at it and I go, again, if 10-2 is good enough for Clemson to keep him, that's fine. 9-3, if you're okay with that, that's fine. But when you get that taste of, hey, we've had a couple of national championships. And by the way, Ed Ogeron had a national championship. There are other coaches who have had national championships who are not with the team that they were. Ed O won in 2019, and there was a lot more behind him. Obviously, I know that's not the same necessarily deal because Dabo and Ed O not the same person at all. But I still do. I look and I go, okay, it's been 5 years. We're getting a 12-team playoff this year. Correct. You're probably going to end up being in it as long as you go at least 10-2. Is it going to be enough if they're not winning consistently? If they're not in the playoffs and actually vying for the top of that? Are we looking at a team who is in that 11-12 spot, right there on the edge, barely squeaking into a 12-team playoff? Because I think if we look over the past couple of years, that was probably the case where Clemson wasn't sitting at the top. By the way, they didn't win the ACC last year in the years where they have.
Yeah, I just, I realize that it's all going to depend on how this season goes, which is ducking your question. I understand. Nobody's patient. Everybody wants to win. Everybody think they should go undefeated. They all, I do realize that Dabo's issues are more glaring, and I think they're, for him, his issues are probably if he'll have a change of heart or change of mind or willing to. I don't know if there's a part of me, because my wife asked me, and I was like, to me, a lot of this is ego driven. I have no problem with his message and what he's saying. But you go back through history, and again, I'm kind of a history guy. You can look, Bear Bryant, they went through several seasons of mediocrity, and then he put in a new offense. And he's like, we're either we're gonna sink or swim, guys. And then they went on this run late in his career. I think it was probably in the later, sometime in the 70s, I think, maybe mid to late 70s. I can't remember. There's other coaches. Of course, Saban, he recognized these offenses were the future, so to speak. Brings in Lane Kiffin. History shows. So, and you can probably go back to even Bud Wilkerson at Oklahoma. I remember Nebraska. That's part of been Nebraska's issue. People have made the adjustments to keep up. Sometimes it's keeping up. Sometimes you're ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
And right now, Dabo's like, no, I'm not willing to do that, and that's, to me, is problematic.
Yeah, I think here's the thing to me. I mean, he has not started a transfer. Clemson is the only other one, with exception to the service academies, who can't take transfers.
Right.
That has not done so. And to me, I look at it and I go, okay, all it takes for Dabo to essentially save himself is this only got to work one time. He only has to have one season where he's Final Four, almost in the playoff or almost in the national championship, to where I think people will look and go, okay, he did it his way, it worked, and maybe give him kind of that grace. So this will be kind of how I wrap that up. Would you say that his seat right now, today, in coming into this season, is cold, warm, or hot?
Oh, I think I'm not saying it's warm. It's between warm and hot.
Warm and hot. Okay.
I'd love. Hey, how about let's go to Tyler in Spartanburg and find out.
Tyler, I love how he didn't take any calls on this. That was one thing I wanted to try to do this season, was get the call-in show stuff started.
That'd be great.
Might have to save it for next season. We'll kind of see. So let's kind of wrap up off of that. So Georgia, obviously a good win over Clemson. Again, 34-3 off of that. I want to look at some of the other games around the country so we can kind of jump into this week and the stuff that's going on there. Should we be worried about Oregon?
No. I look, Georgia national championship year, several games into the season, was it Kent State that we really struggled with? So, I mean,
yeah, it happens. And
everybody needs a bit of a mulligan, and the first of the season, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah, here's the thing that kind of blew me away about it. Okay, the final was 24-14, and it's kind of one of those, what is happening? But then you look at stats, and Dylan Gabriel, 41 for 49, almost threw the ball 50 times. 8 incompletions in that, and threw for 380 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So what was happening, I didn't watch that entire football game, but to me it was they drove down the field and didn't convert. Drove down the field, didn't convert. Drove down the field, and they just never put the points on the board. So I was like, this is supposed to be a high-powered Oregon offense. And when you look at the score, you go, that's not high-powered.
Correct.
But then when you look at stats, you go, okay, they actually are. They did fairly well. I want to look at some of these other games real quick. Penn State, West Virginia, it was a wet game. I'm not really going to put a lot up to that, 34-12. Iowa actually put more than 20 points on the board. They scored 40 points for the first time in probably 20 years, it seems like, for a team who's really good defensively driven. Tennessee is what they are. Ohio State is what they are. Texas looked really good. Miami, Florida. What a game.
Yep.
I said this starting this season. I hope Billy Napier has his resume
sitting
on his desk ready.
I really thought that was a great hire, and it has not come to fruition. And I think that sometimes you start taking on quicksand and you can't get out of it, and unfortunately he's not going to be able to get out of it.
I don't like Florida. I'm a true Georgia fan that does not like Florida. But I feel bad for the guy.
Yeah.
I honestly do. Like, he couldn't even open his water bottle the other night, which was a meme and a video that went around and people cut up. But, like, I was sitting there watching it, just kind of cringing, going, he's a human being.
Totally.
And for whatever reason, I had sympathy for the enemy in that moment. I was just like, I feel really bad, not necessarily for the university, because it's like, it's Florida, we're just going to beat them, and that's okay. I hope they keep him for 10 years. It's not going to happen. But I felt bad for him as an individual who came into this and it was just like, dude, you're on a sinking ship right now.
Yep. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, and he doesn't have the guys around him either.
No.
Miami wins that 41-17. Miami was touted coming into the season as potential ACC winners, and right now they look like the ACC front runner, especially with some of the other games that have gone on. Alabama looked like Alabama. Ole Miss, why not score 85 points? They scored 76. Kansas State looked good. We talked about Oregon. Some of the other big this is one that's going to matter coming up this week. Michigan, Fresno State, 30-10. Michigan didn't look all that exciting to me. But then you had Notre Dame and Texas A&M. Why can't Texas A&M get a quarterback?
That's funny you bring that up because that was on my notes.
Really? Okay.
And I have to be careful with what I say, but I saw a segment of Connor Wegman, the team. They had some guy come in who does magic tricks. I think they call him the mentalist.
Oh, boy.
He's kind of like a Dave and Blaine type.
Yeah.
And Connor was up on the stage with him, and he cannot formulate a sentence. He was such a bumbling moron in that segment. You know, he was so blown. By the way, I cannot stand the term bro and bruh.
Come on, man.
Yeah, okay, fine. This is the old curmudgeon corner then. But he just sat there instead of being like, holy cow, this is unbelievable, as this guy. The trick was incredible.
Yeah.
The card trick was. But I muted it, and this is before my wife had to go take care of something, and my kid. I was like, if I was a Texas A&M fan, I would be so furious right now that my quarterback, who they're touting as, he looked terrible in the game, but I'd be so embarrassed because he's a bumbling moron that cannot even stand there and say something like, bruh, don't, bruh. He's an idiot. I'm sorry. So that was on my notes. That was it.
Very,
so I don't really care about Texas A&M. They're another one for whatever reason.
I think Jimbo really soured them.
Yeah, they're not relevant. They hadn't won a national championship since damn Roosevelt was in office or something. So, I mean, give me a break.
I saw a picture the other day. I don't know if it's a guy on their team or it might have been a guy who played for Notre Dame who was being recruited by them that said, there's still no trophies in these cases. Which I kind of cracked up about.
Yep.
But here's the thing in that game. Connor Wigman was not good.
Not at all.
At all. But the thing that killed me is, I asked the question coming into it, is Notre Dame going to be another team that's just overrated coming into it? Because year after year after year, Notre Dame's ranked in the top 10. They don't finish there. Last year, they lost might have been the year before under, what's his name?
Kelly.
Freeman. Marcus Freeman's first year that he was in there. They lose to Marshall and another team they shouldn't lose to. And they had a good year after that. But the thing I look at, and I'm just not sold on Notre Dame yet because as lackluster as Texas A&M's offense was, even under 2 interceptions thrown by Connor Wigman, that game was still tied at halftime.
I know.
In a game where I go, okay, Notre Dame should, especially, you take what's the guy, quarterback for Notre Dame that played for.
Oh yeah, Leonard Riley.
Yeah, so played for Elko when they were at Duke last year.
Yeah,
and played against each other, and people kind of tried to make that match up, but I still I like Marcus Freeman. I think he's actually probably a pretty fun coach to.
I would say, name another coach that could suit up and play on Saturday.
Oh yeah, exactly, right? Because Elko ain't doing that. Maybe on a line somewhere as a second anyway. But I'm not sold on Notre Dame yet. We'll see how the season goes before I really get sold on them. I want them to play somebody else. And the problem is, it's not a problem for them at all. Their schedule lines up beautifully.
Yeah.
Where they're about to walk to a 12-0 or 11-1 season.
Well, and good for them.
Yeah.
It's a lot of history, a lot of tradition, but their stumbling block has been and will continue to be reducing the academic exemptions.
Yep. All right. So a couple of other games. NC State didn't look very good against Western Carolina. They got Tennessee this week. Interesting. 2 weeks ago, obviously Florida State lost to Georgia Tech, in a different country, and then they came back home, and on Monday they lost in country to another team in Boston College, 28-13. That defense is non-existent in comparison to what it was last year. The offense is mute,
anemic,
which is unbelievable. I don't think I make the joke about 2020 LSU, how good that offense was for LSU in 2019 under Joe Burrow, and how much they fell off that very next year.
Yep.
This is a whole different level of falling off.
I know.
Of
it's
taking
bad.
an entire offseason and the end of last season and everything that happened, and did they deserve to be in? Maybe so. But if you look at this team that there is right now, they did not deserve to be anywhere near it.
No.
And I get it. It's not the same team. But I think they sat on it, and I've heard it all week long. I think they sat so much on that and thought they were deserving of something that they would just walk into this season and it would be no different. And they found out really quickly that's not the case. And I talk about another guy that I feel terrible for. At the end of that game, they pan and they show DJ Uiagalelei standing on the sideline, and he's they're cooked. They're not winning this football game. There's no getting back into it, and it's just looking at him, and he's just like staring off, like, what is happening?
Yeah, I think he has a bit of like a revenge tour.
Yeah.
Against Clemson, and it's not going well.
No. A team that started 10th, by the way, and by the end of the first true week of college football, they've lost 2 football games, and they're not ranked anymore.
Correct. I will say this. Going into the very first game against Georgia Tech, you and I briefly talked about it. Tech has found their guy in their coach.
Yeah.
Much improved.
Brent Key, isn't it?
Yeah, he played there. That's kind of good to see instead of them being just so stinking awful. I mean, I want to beat the brakes off of them. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, Florida State, they need to shut up, and they need to, whatever their motivations are, they need a total reboot of like, we're not here to take revenge on Clemson. We're not going to talk about what happened last year because they need to stop.
It's time to move on.
And they need to play what's in front of them. But I told you, I turned it off.
Yeah.
I enjoyed watching them get beat. I have talked about it on your show plenty of times, and I won't go into it. But it was just it was like, this is such bad football. I'm not watching it.
It was bad.
And I mean, I saw
like seeing wide open guys
get
overthrown, and then guys who should have caught the ball drop it. I was just like, this is it's tough.
Yep.
I hate it for a couple of my FSU friends, at least, that I know you don't, but I do. Just for them.
At all.
But now anyways. So FSU goes down. Then the last game of last week before we get to this week, USC and LSU. LSU for like the past 4 years has played the first game of the season, and it's been a good game to watch as far as good football. They had FSU for the 2 years, and now they got USC this year. I can't remember who it was the year before the 2 FSU series, but it seemed like it was another good one. But they haven't won any of them. That opening game every time they lose it, and this was no different. USC wins this 27-20. The takeaway that I kind of had from this, and I wanted to make sure that I thought I might have had a note on this, but USC might be good this year. I still think they've got some answers to figure out, at least offensively. Obviously, you don't have Caleb Williams anymore. You're starting with new quarterback situation there. But the thing to me is, it looked like USC for the first time ever might have a defense.
They do.
Because LSU has always been a team that can move the football.
Yep.
And again, I look at Jaden Daniels, who's been there, again, another Heisman Trophy candidate, or guy who won the Heisman Trophy, that played against Georgia a couple years ago in the SEC Championship game, and they put in the backup, who is now their starter. And he threw the ball really well. Yep. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. Nussmeier, there you go. Threw the ball really good then. And he gets in here, and all of a sudden it's like a USC defense shuts you down, something that we're just not accustomed to seeing, because USC will get in a game against Utah and it'll be 61-52.
Yeah.
One of those kind of games. And this was one where LSU scored 20 points in the game.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah.
I got nothing to add.
Yeah.
I think they're legit defense.
I think one thing I did enjoy seeing in this, though, was seeing the rage fit that Brian Kelly had after the game. Kind of just beating on the table. I was like, what are you doing?
I think that was his version. It's funny, I was going to mention this. I think that was his version. You know, everybody talked about how Saban used the media to get a point across to his team. I think that was Brian Kelly's attempt at that. Everybody should do themselves a favor watching the 30 for 30 about the 85 Bears and Mike Ditka when they was his coach. And they have a pretty short clip of him in a press conference, and he was not happy. And reporters are asking him questions. Hey, Coach, why on that second down did y'all run the ball instead of – and he's like, because we thought we could that was the best way to get the first down. Next. The next person asked a question, and he'd go, no, next. Yeah. And he just – I mean, it was rapid fire. And I was laughing hysterically watching it. And I've seen it several times, but it was on recently. Brian Kelly might need to take a page out of that because that portrays the message that, A, I'm not happy. I'm going to fulfill my obligations, but that gets the message across to the team that this was a poor effort.
Yeah, beating on a table is not doing it. And also to say this is the first time that I've ever been angry at my team, and then to slap on the table, it's like, what? To me, I looked at it and I just kind of giggle more than I look at it and go, oh, he's serious.
Right.
And I wonder if the players don't do the same thing. Not saying that they do, but it does make you wonder, you know, do they see that and they go, oh, man, coaches for real? Are they looking at it going, what? Who am I playing for?
Right. Well, Feinbaum roasted him as he should have, which was pretty funny. You know, coaches have to take the blame. You know,
a lot of times he doesn't.
And he called him out. He's like, well, you keep doing the same thing and you get coached not to do the same thing, basically, over and over. So, anyway.
Yeah, he's real good at throwing people under the bus. All right, let's get to this week. Let's look at the AP Top 25 real quick. Georgia at the top, Ohio State, Texas, Alabama, Notre Dame, Ole Miss, Oregon, Penn State, Missouri, and Michigan is the top 10. Georgia plays Tennessee Tech this week. I don't expect a lot from this game. You can watch it on SEC Network Plus or ESPN Plus. Those are about the only ways that you're going to watch it. And if you don't have them, or if you have DirecTV, you can't watch anybody that's on ESPN. That was one of the things I noticed. And I kind of giggled about this, and I tweeted about it as well, because watching the Monday night game, which was that LSU USC, or was that – no, that was FSU's second loss of the season. I'd seen where everybody was angry that Sunday because – it was the LSU because it happened Sunday. Because the tour championship was still happening, all of that was happening, and ESPN was cut off on DirecTV. And in the commercial, no joke, I'm watching a DirecTV commercial on ESPN, and I was like, well, that's cool. Nobody from DirecTV sees this commercial, but there it is. And I was like, that's crazy. And I've actually been using Hulu Live for the last almost month, and it has been great.
Good.
I know a lot of people have said YouTube TV. I kind of read and saw some reviews that I was like, they say that it's really far behind and it buffers a lot. With Hulu Live, I've not had that issue.
Good for you.
Having ESPN Plus and all that stuff too, I can watch this weekend. I hope it's 63-0 at the end of the game, but I'll be able to watch it because it's Tennessee Tech and it's on ESPN Plus.
By the way, I have a note about that. Okay. About a 63-0 score, but continue. Okay. I don't want to hijack.
No, you're good. That's it. I'm not going to really be able to dive deep into what's going to happen Saturday because this should be exactly what this game should be. If you look and see, okay, first of all, you can't even watch this on normal television. This should be a great opportunity for Georgia to be able to get experience in the depth that we have. We should be able to get multiple guys into this football game, which we already do, but even deeper than that. We should get a second-string quarterback that should be able to put a lot of effort into the game and kind of figure that out, because this is one thing I've had. Here's some injuries we have coming into it. Michael Williams is out. He's got a sprained ankle. We don't know how long. It's week to week. And anytime Kirby says that, we'll see you in 6 weeks. It's kind of what that feels like. Warren Brinson, he's questionable with an ankle, possibly even a contusion. Might be back, might not this year or next week. So those are the main injuries that I saw. And Michael's a big one.
That one bothers me because of an illegal block like that.
That was not, and that's the reason they say it. And they say, the block was more of a knee issue, and then he had an ankle issue afterwards. To me, I thought it all kind of compiled itself at the same time. But regardless, he is like a Trevor. No, Who did we have first round draft like 2 years ago?
Trayvon Walker.
Thank you. My goodness. My names, dude, they don't work, okay? 44. That's what I look at. Big 44. Anyway, that's what he kind of reminds me of. And the fact that now it's like you might be without him 5 to 6 weeks.
That's awful.
It could only be 2 weeks. I mean, he could be back next week. I don't think you see the field against Tennessee Tech. At least I hope you don't in this. And I don't expect to see him. Obviously, Kirby knows what to do in this situation. He knows how to hold him. That sucks. It sucks to lose him, but I hope we get him back by the time we start playing meaningful football again, because we got Kentucky down the line and then Alabama following them after a bye week. So we've got a little bit of time before we really get into play that we need him back and having that experience. But this is a great opportunity in this game just to gain experience in the depth that we have and hopefully come out injury-free. Get guys in, get guys out, score a lot of points. So your 63-0 thing that you have.
All right, there. So I know we have kind of a bit of a time crunch, so I just wanted to touch on a few notes that I made. I wish I had talked about it or mentioned it earlier when we were talking about Clemson, but I heard the quote that Dabo said that either analysts or whoever, I don't know who he quoted, says that Clemson, this was his defense of the transfer portal stuff, that Clemson has the 5th ranked roster in college football. Now, how he comes up with that, I don't know if that's recruiting. I don't know if they assign numbers to the stars and you get an aggregate number.
Yeah, this must be like out of high school rankings without any transfer.
But see, the thing is that by saying that, that's before the season started, okay, or before the Georgia game. If I'm a Clemson fan, well, if you're telling me we have the 5th ranked roster in college football, then are you lying about that? Are those numbers skewed? Or are you and your staff that bad of coaching? I mean, honestly. So that was one thing I just wanted to mention. The other thing is the 63-0. I'll go ahead and tell you, in week 1 and week 2, when these teams are playing clearly inferior, they're a budget game for these other programs. Scoring 60 and 70 points, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Ole Miss, and there were others, does not impress me at all. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's necessary. Now, somebody who's not a Georgia fan can go, well, wait a minute. Y'all beat TCU 63-3. That is correct. That was also for a national championship. That's why I'm specifying. I mean, 63-3, I'm not giving a pass to Georgia necessarily, but I see that as a different game, okay, with it being a national championship, end of the season. I'm talking about teams that play Nicholls State, Tennessee Tech, all of that. I don't even know who Ole Miss played.
Furman, maybe?
Yeah. To put up that many points, and I know it's not our job to stop. It's their job to stop us. Blah-de, blah-de, freaking blah. I don't care. Just if you're up 49 zip, do you really have to continue on?
Mm-hmm. A couple of these games did get trimmed too.
I know there's not a perfect scenario, and I know people would blast me for that, but I have always thought, and I've talked about it before, that's what Oklahoma did forever, is Oklahoma would stub their toe against a team they shouldn't, and then they would try to score as many points like, oh, don't look there. Don't look at that loss. Look that we scored 66 against somebody, by the way, that was, Welding Academy of Oklahoma, okay? So that kind of stuff just aggravates the hell out of me personally. All right. Next, this is the curmudgeon corner, okay?
All right.
I want to bring an end to people when they run for, stumble, catch for a first down, and they stand up and do that first down motion. I want that to go away permanently and forever. 2, I cannot stand listening to an analyst and he's a Georgia alum, and he does kind of a local show, but he refers to the football as the rock. He's throwing the rock. He's handing off the rock. We need that to disappear from our lexicon of daily life forever. 3, FSU and Georgia Tech, referencing that game as quote unquote across the pond. I want those 3 things over and done with. I cannot. At my age, things like this shouldn't aggravate me, but I got a lot of aggravation in my life with this new job we're having to do and the people we have to deal with. I want those 3 things to change. It's not that hard. If I was a coach, if I'm like, hey, you stand up and do the first down, especially when we're behind
go sit down.
by 3 touchdowns. By the way, getting the first down is exactly what you're trying to do, if not more. So you don't have to brag about it.
Yeah. We get it. You got it.
I miss the days of the guys that, they just did stuff and it was no big deal. And whether it was Herschel Walker, Bo Jackson, you name it. Look, I get it. Put your arms up. Heck, yep, boom, boom, boom. I wasn't a big fan of the Sony Michel toss. You'd throw them up in the air. Of course, as a Georgia fan, we've had too many people that celebrate and blow out their knees. So it's like, y'all stay on the ground, especially in a celebration. So I don't know. It bothers me.
Yeah.
It bothers me. So it is. It's the curmudgeon corner.
Thank you for that curmudgeon corner moment there from Hunter.
And that was it. I wanted to talk about the blowouts. And also the bad part of that is I heard a lot of analysts just gushing about these teams. One guy said, and he very well may, but I've never heard him say something about the quarterback at Tennessee. I've never heard this about any analyst say this.
Or whatever.
Where he said he's going to win a Heisman. It's maybe not this year, but he will win a Heisman. I thought, wow, that's
pretty high praise.
That's high praise and a lot of pressure for beating a really inferior team.
Yeah.
Big whoop. That I don't like that. I don't like the praise from the analysts. And that was all I had. I've already talked about the analyst as
all right, so I'm going to try to run back through all of it. So the high score, and I did see where a couple of teams, like I think Arkansas, for example, they played in the second half. They played 2 10-minute quarters. Maybe as Ole Miss that the second half they had a running clock for both quarters. They never stopped the clock. Some of it they try to find a way to limit it for some of these teams. Kentucky played three quarters of football, just enough to be declared, hey, this is good
but
enough.
that was weather.
That was weather related. So there is some that they try to do without making a 10-run rule, so to speak. What was the other thing? The curmudgeon corner, I do like I remember Nick Chubb and Sony, man. They were ones, they ran through you, they got up, they handed the football to the ref, and they got back in line and went and made another play. Didn't matter if they busted 40, 50, or 2 yards. They got up and they went to the next thing. And then what was the other thing?
You said – no, Sony, he used to get
they would toss them up after a touchdown, but they weren't doing like the first down or anything big like that. They didn't have to celebrate that. They just got in line, and if they scored, okay, we'll talk about it then. But, he had his fancy hands is what I call them. But what was the other thing? You had 3 points
calling
there.
It the rock, the football, the rock.
Yeah, the rock,
And then across the pond.
Across the pond, those are
so annoying.
That's pretty
just
funny.
Talk.
The curmudgeon corner, I like that though. All right, so that's kind of what we've got this week. Again, there's not a lot to run through with Tennessee Tech, but I do want to look at some of these other big games that are going on around the country. A couple to watch for, I think, is App State at Clemson. App State always has a good football team. Very rarely have they had a team where it's like, we don't really have to worry about this. They don't really have many times where they come in as a nickel state. And it's like, I don't have to worry about App State. App State is always a team who can come in and beat you. They did it at Texas A&M, 2 years ago? There's been a bunch of years that App State's always been right there.
Beat Michigan.
So I think that's a very strong possibility for App State to come in there and show up Clemson at the same time. So that's a fun one. Colorado-Nebraska play. I think that's the trash talk of the West game that's going to happen between what looks like Pat Mahomes Jr. playing against Colorado. Tennessee and NC State. NC State's ranked, but again, last week.
They're not good.
They're just not good.
Nope.
I got a feeling Tennessee's probably going to end up killing them in this game. Or Tennessee might not, and we might go, maybe Tennessee's not that good. But I think this is going to be a
No,
runaway for Tennessee.
I think the Tennessee. I didn't watch any of that game. I definitely see that the guy that can run Heupel's offense. I think they've got an exceptional offense. I don't know about their defense. Doesn't matter. So it'll be kind of interesting to kind of see how they are. But I don't think they won't have any trouble.
Yeah. Last couple games to round out this week. Arkansas, Oklahoma State. I think that might be a good game. Arkansas might have a good quarterback. Most people have Arkansas at the bottom of the SEC this year, kind of with Mississippi State and Vanderbilt. By the way, Vanderbilt, shout out to them beating Virginia Tech
and Mississippi State.
Yeah, and Mississippi State, yeah.
And Missouri.
Yeah, Missouri always looks good, but
nobody's mentioned them because they played early or something.
Yeah, they played early.
I get it. Look,
again, they won 51-0 too.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not a big fan of them.
But there's a reason they're in the top 10 also.
Are they really?
Yeah, they are. They're like 8th or 9th, I think, something like that.
No kidding. Wow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean they're a good football team, and they're going to be again. I'm excited to see them get to play Alabama this year because I think they're on the schedule. I wish we had the schedule.
I know. I'll look for the schedule.
But I think Arkansas, Oklahoma State could be a good game. Arkansas is not ranked. Oklahoma State is. I think it's in Oklahoma State, so that'll be one to watch. I circled this one just because of last season. University of South Florida this year comes up to Alabama. Alabama went to them last year, and it was a really close game that didn't make any sense. Didn't make any sense for Alabama to be there.
Yeah.
And it definitely didn't make any sense for them to be in that football game, but they were. I think this will probably be a revenge game to avenge how close that game was last year. But I can't get over the fact that game was not good for them last year. Again, they were figuring things out last year.
Oh, yeah.
That they've got figured out this year, so I don't think it's going to be the same, but I at least circled it because I thought it was funny.
Yeah, fair enough.
The other thing we were talking about earlier that finally crossed my brain, Dabo says they had a top 5 team. Looking at 24/7 Rivals, which is our 24/7 Recruits, which is where they look at the recruiting class for that season. They were ranked 10th, I think, in 22, and then the past 2 seasons they've been ranked 11th. So I don't know where he gets his ranking from because it's not adding a generally, when you add a transfer class in, like for Ole Miss, has got to be the top this season. And it's also funny kind of looking back through those because Texas A&M, they had that number 1 class. But anyways, and then the last game that I think everybody's kind of excited to watch this week is Texas-Michigan. That's the big one of the week. I think Texas is going to steamroll Michigan. I hope they do.
I hope they do, and they will. It's going to be tragic for Michigan. Yeah. By the way, you haven't had a chance to see the Connor Scallions?
No, I hadn't watched the documentary.
We watched it.
Some people said it was hilarious to watch.
Me and Julia watched it. It was fascinating.
Really.
It was kind of cloaked in, like there's this secret underground society on all these college teams that have a code breaker, essentially. That was intriguing. The fact that when he went into hiding, it showed him at different games.
Oh, yeah.
He'd made some cameos on Dave Portnoy when he was doing his pizza stuff. It would be him leaving. And he actually, he'd be leaving the pizza shops. And it showed him, they filmed him going to, golly, it seems like more than just one, but he was there for the national championship game.
Wow.
And there was one time where he talked about he went to a game, full ski mask, the whole 9 yards, and nobody knew who he was. He said, but he said something to a linebacker on the team, and he recognized him. And they, like, hey man, it was all good, But it was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to watch it.
But there were some major indiscretions about. I didn't realize that if he was the guy on the sideline at Central Michigan. And he kind of played it up, and he held up a photo. He's like, I don't even think I look like that guy. Then when they interviewed Dave Portnoy, he was like, yeah, he told me he was the guy on the sideline.
Yeah.
And then later it shows him in a deposition, and the NCAA, through a Zoom deal, asked him about it. And that was the problem. That was probably my biggest problem is, he was sitting there with his attorneys, and all of a sudden, he kind of did the Oliver North. I don't recall. Yes, I bought a lot of tickets for a lot of games, and whatever. But a guy from the Detroit Free Press, he he was good in it, and he just said, "Look, were they a great team? Absolutely." But he said, I think at the end of the day, he said, did they cheat? Yes.
Yeah.
And he's not saying take away the wins, take away the title. He's just saying, look, we can sit here and talk in circles, but at the end of the day, did they cheat? Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever that may mean. But anyway, it's worth –
Yeah,
by the way, I didn't spoil it.
No, you're good.
It's worth seeing.
I'm going to have to watch it, and I do think that Hammer's coming for Michigan at some point. They're going to vacate a lot, and the only one that got away with it was the guy who walked out of the back of the bank with all the money bags in his hand and left, and nobody ever saw him leave, and that's Jim Harbaugh.
Correct.
He will have no repercussions to pay for this.
He's fine. He's going to rest on the fact that I brought my alma mater back. I won a Big Ten championship. I finally beat Ohio State 3 years in a row. And that's kind of the big thing, is that a lot of information is like somebody hacked into his computer and whatnot, and it all kind of leads back to Ohio State. And apparently Ryan Day's brother is kind of in that stuff. And I don't know. And his attorneys are like, by the way, if they asked the NCAA, where'd you get your information? And they, of course, won't answer.
Yeah. It gets
that turns into a legal issue.
Yeah.
Legitimate legal issue too. So
it all runs deep. Because college football runs deep, baby.
But anyway, I mean, I don't care for Jim Harbaugh at all, So,
is what it is. Well, hey, we got football to watch again this weekend. Again, not as many fun games this week, but Georgia will be on my TV at least. With the
won't be on
Plus.
mine.
Won't be on DirecTV customers' TVs.
I don't have that, thank goodness.
And I've seen an outpour of people leaving there. I don't blame them. So excited to at least watch some football this weekend. Glad football season's back. It was a great week one.
Yeah.
Getting to see the Dogs on the field. Looking forward to getting to see them again this week and see what we do in the weeks to come. We got much bigger games to come. Looking forward to those as well. And I just want to tell you, hey, thanks for coming on and giving us a curmudgeon minute while you were on as well. And I look forward to us catching up again.
Thank you. I love it. We talk about it all the time. We still need to wire the office.
Absolutely. Just put a bunch of cameras and everything up here. That's another thing, too. You guys make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. So when we do get back up on YouTube, you will at least be able to see it. Hunter, thank you again.
Thank you, Holden. Great job, buddy.
I'll check in with you guys after the Dogs play this weekend. Tennessee Tech. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.